Do you remember the year that Christmas almost wasn't? Back in 2013, it was reported by the Chinese National Air Force that an unknown flying vessel had been shot down over the mainland China Sea. And upon inspection, they determined it was some sort of wood-based snow conveyance, rigged with leather harness, piloted by a Finnish national of unknown identity, and led by 8 tiny reindeer. On December 26, a spokesman released a statement that, while the death of Santa Claus was regrettable, it was by no means a negative mark against the Chinese National Air Force, as it could not be expected of them to track a low-tech flight device on modern sensors. If anything, it was a negative statement about the European guidelines for flying vessels that such a thing was allowed to take to the air at all. The fact that this missive reaches our ears at all is because of the guilty conscience of Air Force Lieutenant General Liu Bojun, who said that the following night he was visited by tiny men in green clothes with pointed ears who bound him in licorice ropes and carried him off to speak with a towering figure dressed in red, his eyes burning like smoldering coal, who told him that his actions had almost rendered the world the last bit of magic it could possess. So after this public decry, the Lieutenant General retired and has since devoted himself to the manufacturing of small toys and candies for orphans. These are jolly times, ladies and gentlemen. And these stories come from very jolly places. Greetings and happy holidays, listeners. This is Professor Jonas Armitage, and you're listening to Stories from Dark Places. Tonight's broadcast is a very special event celebrating Christmas Eve and a notorious figure almost as renowned as Santa himself. First, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us on this special broadcast. Getting to share the holidays with you is a wonderful experience, and I would like to tell you all how grateful I am that you've been here to join us for this broadcast through its entirety, as well as all our previous broadcasts before. We started back in June, I believe, and it's been an interesting experience, all things considered, from hassles from city residents reluctant to accept us, to my own abduction and recollection, and to coming back to all of your welcoming presences. I would like to thank you for being a part of what has been a very interesting year. I hope you're all having a pleasant evening, tucked in by the fire, listening to stories, sharing the company of your loved ones. I plan to do something like that myself. I'll get into that after our story, but first, please enjoy an absolutely legendary tale, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, by Doctor Seuss. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. "And they're hanging their stockings," he snarled with a sneer. "Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here." Then he growled, with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, "I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming." For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys. And then, oh the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise, 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 noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down for a feast, and they'd feast, And they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together, with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked, what a great Grinchy trick! With this coat and this hat I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't catch a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up!" and the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Who lay a-snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care, when he came to the first little house on the square. "This is stop number 1. The old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. "These stockings," he grinned, "are the first things to go." Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present, pop-guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums, and he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash, while that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree, and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He looked around fast, and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was no more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said,
"Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?"
But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, and I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney, himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn. All the Who's still in bed, all the Who's still a-snooze, when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings and trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the who! He was grinchiously humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo! That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear, and he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville, the Grinch popped his eyes, and then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing, without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, somehow or other. It came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, bags. And he puzzled 3 hours, till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so right, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast, and he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. I do so love that story. It has a special place in my heart. When Philip and I were children, our parents would read that to us every Christmas Eve. It was part of a ritual that I've held tightly to for many years, long after they passed. This will be our last show for the year, and sometime afterward, I'm afraid. I have some family business I must attend to in Washington State, so I will not be available for the broadcast, and, with any luck, I shall be back by the start of February to resume. I am looking forward to taking to the airwaves again and sharing these stories, new ones, with all of you. I don't have very much family, but I have come to consider Danielle and the rest of the Cardenas clan our interns and, of course, our listeners and subscribers as an extension of that tightly knit family. Thank you for being here to share this journey with me. I am truly grateful. Anyway, happy holidays to you all, and I wish you the most merry of Christmases and a happy New Year. And please do remember that when you hear that soft tinkling of a sleigh bell at night, the gentle click of footfalls on the roof, there is nothing to be afraid of. After all, some of the best things only happen in the dark.
Stories from Dark Places was recorded before an imaginary studio audience. All stories performed on this podcast have express written consent from the original author. Johnas Armitage, his studio manager, and the entire staff of WZHP Radio Innsmouth are fictitious characters, and it's probably for the best that you continue to believe that.